So we're going to talk about assessments and how we can help. And then after we talk about some of the stuff, then we're going to practice, because instead of us like role playing some things, I've got like a bunch of different YouTube videos of classrooms, and we're going to like take notes on what, well, I'll tell you what we're doing later, but we're going to watch some videos. So there we go. Okay, so assessments. So this is really going to be like very broad overview, okay? So generally speaking, when we talk about conducting assessments for our learners, they can fall into, I would say, 3 categories. Standardized norm reference assessments, criterion reference assessments, or functional assessments. There are variations to all of those things, and I'll pull out some of the stuff that we have here. Should have done that ahead of time. Do you want to grab assessment books, all the different assessment books we have? I think they're like the top shelf, 3rd cubby to the left. I think most of them are in the same spot. So norm reference assessments are going to be compared to the norm. The norm being maybe individuals of the same age without a particular diagnosis. We have the Vineland is norm reference that we use. We have the Vineland 2. I haven't got the Vineland 3 yet because they don't, none of my funders require it yet. But the Vineland gives you an age comparison. Yay, thanks, Jamie. Gives you age comparison for different skills. So if your learner is engaging in, can do these kinds of skills, it'll give an age comparison. It'll give you kind of where on the spectrum compared to other individuals, their age. Are they within the average? Are they above average? Are they below average in this area? Norm reference assessments are often used in conjunction with a diagnosis to see, is there a problem in this area? Is this a situation where the learner is significantly different from the average range here? And that can help lead towards a diagnosis. It's also important though, and I've definitely seen the field, the applied field, kind of swing back a little bit more, or starting to swing back a little bit more. There were a few talks at ABAI about not completely dismissing norm reference just because we tend to use curriculum or criterion reference assessments, because if we're always focusing just on the individual and what they can do and improving their skills, but not referencing it back to what their peers are doing, we may sort of take our kid on a tangent, or we may not be hitting things that are developmentally appropriate or that would help them be more successful back in another environment. So making sure that we are still using, like, what is everybody else this kid's age doing to help guide what kinds of things we should be working on. Criterion reference assessments are not necessarily compared to another individual. They're the learner's performance compared to themselves over time. So the ABLES, I don't know if we have the ABLES one on there. I think it's in the other thing, but the ABLES is a good example. The ABLES has basically a list of sort of the component skills and the sequential progression within a certain area, but it doesn't really give you a comparison as to like what age somebody should be doing this or what age a peer does this. It's just like, well, first they should be doing some vocal imitation, then they should be doing some word imitation, then they should be able to repeat phrases, but it doesn't say like when those things should happen. But it does let you compare the individual to their previous performance and show that they are making progress at their pace, whatever their pace is. Oftentimes, at least maybe it's just my training, but when I was getting my certification, there was a huge focus on using criterion reference assessments, bless you, instead of and excluding norm reference assessments, because the criterion reference assessments you would use to program from. The VB map, which I know you grabbed there, I want to say is a little bit, it's a little bit in betweenish. Yeah, so it's definitely criterion referenced in that it is going to show you the progress. So first they're doing 2-word request or 2 mans. They have 2 mans, and they have 4 mans that they generalize, and then they have 6 mans with the object not around, things like this, that progression of what would be expected in order. But it also clusters them by age, where typically developing peers would have these within this kind of an age range. It's not necessarily as normed as some of the other ones. And I've actually, I'm not sure, you guys might know a little bit more, but I've seen some people posting about, well, you know, we talk about how great the VB map is, but it actually doesn't have as much research behind it as, you know, maybe what people are led to believe. I don't know, I haven't looked into that yet myself, but it is a helpful assessment to identify, you know, things like, okay, is most of the skills that my learner is demonstrating significantly below where they are, and then I can use this to sort of help them to catch up. The goal with the VB map being that if they have all those skills, they should be able to be successful in kindergarten. That was kind of the idea behind that. But if you start using it with kids that are already in kindergarten, then, you know, you've probably got some other gaps, and it doesn't cover everything. So norm reference and criterion reference, they're both helpful. They're both useful and should be used kind of in combination. So we shouldn't be like programming, we shouldn't be teaching to the test, right? We shouldn't be pulling programs straight from an assessment and then only teaching what's next in that assessment, because no assessment is going to cover everything anyway, and then that's also not very individualized. Functional assessments, you guys are probably a bit more familiar with these. This is where you are attempting to uncover conditions that could be maintaining behavior. So this is our functional behavior assessment. 3 main components. One is going to be the indirect. This is going to be the survey or the report that someone's giving you about what's happening with the problem behavior. This is also honestly how all of our conversations start. You guys say, oh, so so-and-so is doing this now. I say, okay, tell me about what that looks like. Tell me, you know, what's happening before, what's happening after. Describe it to me. That conversation is a very informal, indirect assessment. There are some more formal surveys that get at that indirect assessment piece. The goal of the indirect assessment is to get an idea as to what to observe and to maybe have an initial hypothesis so that you can focus the rest of your functional assessment, functional behavior assessment, and make the most of your time. The goal is you shouldn't be able to write a behavior plan from a conversation. There should be other things that go along with that. One of those is the descriptive analysis or direct observation. So actually going and seeing the behavior, what's occurring before, what's occurring after. This is why we have you guys take ABC data on everything, because you're all doing this direct observation piece. Anytime there's a problem behavior, you're already writing that direct observation information down for us. So then when you say, hey, this came up, you can also report accurately on what occurred in that situation, in that setting, so that we have some of that direct observation information and can look at evaluating the behavior plan or developing a behavior plan. And this is not to say that direct observation is only done in this context. Like, you should be, like, direct observation is done in any of the other assessments as well. In order to conduct an assessment, you have to interact with the individual. None of these are just parent report. The Vineland is an interview format filled out by the caregiver or the teacher, but it also, like, I never just do that with an individual. It's a component. I would still interact with the individual, even if that was the only formal kind of paper assessment that I had. I would still be interacting with the individual, you know, trying some things out, given whatever that setting is, or observing them in their setting. So direct observation doesn't only happen if you're doing an FBA, just to clear that. And then after direct observation would be a functional analysis. So this is where you actually go and you change and manipulate some of those contingencies to test out what is reinforcing to determine the function for that individual. Now, Dr. Machado did a really great presentation on this in the spring at UAA, and all FAs do not have to look like this very classic, structured, in a room with just the assessor and the kid, although we are doing that pull out for one of our kids right now for HT. That's not the only way that you can do an FA. You can also do them you know, trial-based in a classroom. You can manipulate some things within the environment, but it basically comes down to you are changing the consequences to determine what's reinforcing for that individual, what's working for that individual in order to write the behavior plan. But a functional analysis, an FA, is generally what people think of as sort of that like classic one-on-one with the kid in a room, which is what we were doing. So it's fun, and it gives you information too that is important to have. So questions about assessments, like I said, very, very broad. Additional comments? Did I miss anything, Jamie or Sarah, on assessment? Okay. So what we generally do, we conduct an assessment. So I'll just kind of walk you through what we do here when I bring on a new family. So the first thing that I do is I meet with the family before we even say we're accepting you. I meet with the family to talk about what their concerns are, and I have an informal parent survey. Well, I guess it's formal because it's on paper and I do it for everybody. So it's just mine. It's my personal one. I didn't pull it from anywhere. But do a parent interview asking about, you know, what are their concerns? What kind of skills are they looking to improve? What kind of behaviors are they looking to decrease? What kind of challenges their kid has. Also things like, what does your kid like to do? What have you found that works well for them in the past? To get an idea as to what they're looking for. And then I can talk about what we offer and whether or not those things match up. You know, we're not the right option for everybody. Some people are looking for different things. Some things are outside of my area of expertise. I have other people, so we have a broader area of expertise as we have other people who have different experiences and training, but not everybody is a good fit for company. Sometimes people are looking for clinic-based services, and although we do make occasional exceptions for some of our preschoolers, we're not a clinic-based program, so that's not something that we could offer if that is what somebody was looking for. We're primarily in-home based. Then if it looks like we're all on the same page, yes, we can help you. You are happy with what we have to offer. Then we would get authorization from their funding source to be able to conduct a more formal assessment. That assessment could involve a ton of things. We've got, so for our most recent kid, we did a VB map. We sent Vineland's home with the family, and then we also observed in the classroom with the socially savvy assessment there. Yeah, socially savvy, there we go. So that is one that focuses specifically on like social skills and those prerequisites kind of to the, well, I mean, I don't know if you have prerequisites to social skills, but things like joint attention, where like if you're not even looking at other people and what they're referencing, it's going to be really hard to make progress on any of the other more complex social skills. So really breaking down those social skills. The other one that we do specifically for military families, because TRICARE requires it, is the PDDBI, which is giant. Which is, that whole book is just filled with like charts. It's not even like that much. It's mostly just charts. The PDDBI is interesting because it is norm referenced, but it is normed towards typical autism. So what you get is you get a profile that shows whether or not the kid falls within the range of what a classic autism case would look like.
So they can try to save money.
Or, or if they fall outside of those areas, or outside of that range in the different areas. I have found that it was beneficial, particularly with one client that we had been working with. Started with the client before his 3rd birthday, had been working with him intensive, in-home program, had made tons of progress, but we were still having some issues with like impulsivity and generalizing some of those skills back to the parents. And so I pulled that. They weren't TRICARE, we didn't have to, but I was like, well, let's just see what this looks like. And it showed basically that he didn't really meet the criteria according to that for the classic autism, but he did have really high behaviors in the hyperactivity kind of area. So we basically referred out to somebody else who specializes in ADHD, and they evaluated him, and then they pursued treatment that way. And for him, although I know that the family, you know, had initially not wanted to do medication, we had done everything else. And then with this, it's like, well, look, this is kind of the key feature that he's missing, is he actually needs a little bit of medication, and done. And that solved the last of it. So it was really helpful in that sense. Anytime insurance kind of makes you use certain things, you have to sort of question like, well, but why? But the idea would be that they could identify maybe some comorbid diagnoses. And I would think that that would be the best. It was also very interesting to see one time I got a family, because they have the teacher version and the parent version. So I had a family, and when they filled out all of their information and we talked about it and stuff, on their scale, the way that they rated things, they didn't really recognize, or the kid didn't show up as having classic autism according to parent report. Because basically the parent, I mean, I don't know why the parent's vision of this was skewed, but the parent wasn't seeing these behaviors as being as big a concern or as interfering with their lifestyle or their situation. So I'm like, well, this could really explain why I keep telling you we need more and more hours, and you keep saying now we're good. Like, we have different opinions as to what this looks like. And, you know, so I mean, assessments like that can give you some information, but that was a wayside tangent. But we conduct assessments. If we need to, we do FAs, we do FBAs to determine behavior plans so that a learner can be successful if they're engaging in problematic behaviors that we need to decrease right away. And we also use that information to target like what parents are going to find important.